It was a breezy October morning in southern Wales. Norman Lord Robert Fitzmartin was finalizing the deployment of his troops on a grassy hillside. Several thousand well-equipped mercenaries and levies, bolstered by numerous heavy cavalry reserve, was sufficient reason to maintain confidence. The sound of a horn blared in the distance as the enemy force approached from the northeast, just as Robert's scouts had reported. The Norman commander took a step forward and inhaled deeply. The battle was about to begin. It's late autumn of the year 1135. Almost 70 years have passed since Duke William of Normandy landed on the English shore and routed the Anglo-Saxon host, subsequently crowning himself as the first Norman king of England. Although William and his successors managed to enforce the new rule over the entirety of England by the end of the 11th century, compelling most of the Anglo-Saxon nobility to flee abroad, the subordination of the unbending Welsh states proved to be a far more challenging endeavour. Several military expeditions were launched over the years with the intention of subduing the Welsh, but the results of these campaigns never seemed to last. In order to guard the borderlands and contain the Welsh threat, the Normans created a number of new lordships along the border. These Welsh marches were governed by some of the most loyal confidants of the Norman kings of England, who enjoyed a great deal of independence in their struggle against the Welsh states. Hoping to extend their influence, marcher lords meddled in the affairs of the Welsh nobility, encouraged Norman and English immigration, and erected numerous motte and bailey castles throughout the region, mostly at the border. Though the Welsh ruling class defied the rising Norman influence in their homeland, by 1135, a good part of Wales was under Norman control. But in the early winter of that year, a new hope sparked for the Welsh magnates to turn the tide in their uneasy relationship with the Norman lords. It was the beginning of December when unexpected news reached England. Whilst campaigning in Normandy, Henry I, the youngest son of William the Conqueror and incumbent king of England, died at the age of 67, leaving no legitimate male heir. Henry's death sparked yet another succession crisis in England, which caused the Norman lords in Wales to shift their focus and quickly redeploy their forces back to England. For the Welsh, it was an excellent opportunity to recover their lands lost over the preceding decades to the Normans. The signal was given to revolt by the men of Brycheiniog, who attacked and routed the Norman contingent in the Gower Peninsula, killing some 500 men. Encouraged by this early victory, King Griffith of Deheubarth rushed north to meet his counterpart of Gwynedd and enlist his aid in the revolt. Yet during his absence, another Norman party raided the southern Welsh settlements, forcing Griffith's wife, Gwenllian, to raise a force to defend her people. This time, however, the Welsh host was defeated, and Gwenllian was captured and beheaded by the Normans. Moreover, her two oldest sons were also killed in the wake of the battle. The word of Gwenllian's execution caused even more unrest across the country, and the Welsh revolt spread like a wildfire. Upon hearing the news, her husband Griffith and her brothers, hell-bent on revenge, wreaked havoc in the Norman-controlled Ceredigion, attacking Norman, English, and Flemish settlers, burning crops, towns, and storming castles. Of course, this upheaval in Wales couldn't have gone unnoticed by the Norman lords in England. In April of 1136, Richard de Clare, Lord of Ceredigion, attempted to return to Wales with the intention of stabilizing the situation. Despite the warnings, he tried to force his way through the borderlands with a token force, but his journey ended abruptly. He was ambushed in a hilly and heavily forested area by the men of Gwent, who annihilated Richard's party and slew him. This event not only warned other marcher lords, but also served as an important unifying factor for the usually divided Welsh rulers. Over the course of the next couple of months, the Norman grip of Ceredigion waned as the Welsh leaders captured most of the important castles in the area, leaving only the stronghold of Cardigan under Norman control. By early October, the Welsh army, commanded by Owain, son of King Gwynedd and brother of executed Gwenllian, already swelled to more than 6,000 men, mostly from Gwynedd and Deheubarth. But rumours hinted that the Norman army assembling near Cardigan was even more numerous. On the late morning of the 10th of October, Norman commander Robert Fitzmartin received a report that the Welsh army was approaching from the north. He decided to muster his troops and leave the castle, preparing to meet the enemy on the field. The Norman host took up solid defensive positions on a nearby moderately steep hill and deployed in 3 lines. Robert put his best infantrymen, the Flemish mercenaries, on the front and kept the levy infantry in the reserve. The third line, comprised of Norman heavy cavalry, intended to charge at the Welsh at the most opportune moment later in the battle. It was around noon when the sun hid behind the clouds as the Welsh host approached from the northeast. It surely must have been a discouraging sight for Owain and Griffith to see the numerous, well-equipped Norman army fortified on the hillside. But even if they hesitated, no trace of doubt could be seen on their faces. The bulk of Welsh infantry, mostly decent soldiers of Gwynedd, deployed in a single line with their flanks secured by cavalrymen, who were not only less numerous, but also considerably inferior to their Norman counterparts. In front of Owain's infantry marched around 2,000 Welsh archers armed with longbows, a dangerous weapon which, if used properly, decimated enemy ranks. In the 12th century, it was still quite uncommon to see the weapon being used on the battlefield, but even the Welsh commanders were not entirely sure if it was a wise idea. Nevertheless, their army advanced to a range of around 200 meters, and upon the longbow men being ready, the first volley of arrows was released upon the unexpecting Normans. Arrows cut through the first line of Flemish mercenaries, opening the death toll. Further volleys followed, and dozens of Flemings fell. In a matter of minutes, the casualties rose so sharply on the Norman side that they were compelled to move reserve units to fill the holes in the first line. Robert Fitzmartin was undoubtedly surprised of the archery volleys, and seeing many of his infantrymen wavering under the relentless rain of Welsh arrows, commanded the Norman heavy cavalry to move out and attack the enemy line to relieve their footmen. But as soon as they were prepared to charge, the Welsh longbowmen switched their targets and shot at the Norman riders, breaking cohesion and dealing considerable damage. Shortly before the impact, the archers swiftly retreated behind their spear infantry, which braced for the Norman charge. Finally, the two sides clashed and the clamor of bent steel and agony rang out across the battlefield. But it instantly became apparent that the Norman attack, being greatly disorganized and weakened by the Welsh archers, didn't have enough momentum to break the enemy line and rout Owain's infantry. Upon seeing the charge stall, Robert Fitzmartin realized that the position of the Norman cavalry was becoming increasingly vulnerable and commanded a retreat. Subsequently, Welsh cavalry rushed forward to chase the fleeing enemy. For the beleaguered Norman infantry, the sight of Allied cavalry fleeing was more than enough reason to abandon their positions in disarray. Welsh riders pursued the running enemy, resulting in even more casualties among those who were unable to reach Cardigan Castle and cross the River Teivi, thus avoiding slaughter. It was a stunning victory for the Welsh insurgents, who managed to rout a better positioned and equipped Norman army, possibly killing as many as 3,000 men, with a negligible toll on their own side. The Battle of Crug Mawr was an early example of the potential of longbowmen used in large numbers, and also a significant blow to the Norman presence in Wales. Yet the Welsh allies of Gwynedd and Deheubarth only partially capitalized on this victory. King Griffith died in unclear circumstances a year later, and the possible expansion of his domain was put on hold, at least until his son reached majority. In Gwynedd, however, Owain gained immense popularity and replaced his deceased father on the throne a year later, annexing lands of Norman-occupied Ceredigion to his domain strengthening his rule in the process and becoming a significant threat to the Norman expansion in the region in the following decades. This video is sponsored by Audible. Without a doubt, Audible is the largest source of audio entertainment online, with a near limitless variety to select from. A strong recommendation for fans of the channel would be The Allure of Battle by Cathal J. Nolan, an in-depth look at the history of warfare and the true consequences of pitched battle. Hit the link in the description below. Head over to audible.com/BazBattles or text BazBattles to 500-500 for our US watchers. And not only will you be supporting our channel, but you'll receive a 30-day trial on Audible where you can try any audiobook for free, along with access to 2 Audible originals, exclusive audio titles crafted by the world's most celebrated storytellers. And if you cancel your membership, you still get to keep your audiobooks. They're yours. So there's absolutely no obligation. Supporting all major platforms and devices, visit audible.com/BazBattles or text BazBattles to 500-500 in the US and begin your free trial.